All right, ladies,
Oh,
welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is so exciting to have all of you in one place at one time and get to see your beautiful faces.
hello, darling. It's lovely to be back, and thank you for inviting me.
Good to
Yeah.
be here,
Hi,
Chaz.
as well.
All right. As we all know, but for the audience to know, we are talking about building a business, either through, during, or post recovery, and everything about that, what it looks like, what it feels like, the ways it helps us through our recovering journey, the way it might cause setbacks, and then how we manage that, all the good stuff. And so what I'd like to do to set us up is I'd have each of you spend a few minutes just sharing a little bit about yourself and what really inspired you to step into this journey, to take this on, to birthing a business, and just where the mission or the inspiration came from, if you will. And anyone can start. Don't be shy.
I don't mind starting if you want. It's weird when there's more than two people in a conversation. It's like Brady Bunch, you're not sure where to go. We've obviously had conversations before, Chaz, and some of my story, but just a little recap. I had chronic back pain for about 3 or 4 years and chronic anxiety my whole life. Now I look back, it was a laundry list of many different things. And I found this mind body work, although all of us approach it in a slightly different way, it's all singing the same sort of song, I think. And I almost fell into this accidentally. And I think from what I've spoken to a lot of people about the progress, when you're healing and when you feel healed, you feel compelled to do something with that information that helped you because so many other people are suffering. And I think that's probably true for most of us. So initially it was just once I'd recovered, or I don't think anybody's ever 100% healed because we live in a mind body system, right? It's like you're never going to be switched on or off. That's just the way it is. But out of that chronic cycle, I felt I needed to do something with the information that I'd found. And back then, it's not that long ago, but it feels like long ago now. Back then, there wasn't really that much information online about mind body recovery. There was some books, there was TMS Wiki, there was Nicole Sachs doing her podcast and a few other things, but nowhere near like it is now. So I felt compelled to put together all the links that I'd used, all of the information that I'd found to help me recover into one place. And I just built the website, mytmsjourney.com, to help other people. I had no idea that this was like going to become my job. I was going to say quite happy graphic designer. In my past life, I was severely stressed out, burnt out, 9 to 5, a freelancer. But as soon as I kind of connected with people in the community, I realized that there was more to what I'd done than just stick it online and leave it. Once I felt well enough, I decided to do a yoga teacher training just for my own enjoyment because I was well enough to do it, like a reward for recovering. And then it just fell into place that it makes sense to teach these principles, this nervous system work to other people. So it's happened by accident. It was never really my intention to make a business out of this. It was never on my radar. It's only very recent that it has been on my radar. But yeah, I almost did it by accident, which is probably quite weird because every other business I've ever been involved in has been like business plan and have meetings every day about it and stick to your goals and sales targets and shit. And this has just been a massive wing it and see what happens for me. So yeah, that kind of summarizes that for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really organic. You just started with, oh, I'm just going to do a class a week. And then it seems like there was
Yeah.
this demand and you just kept responding to the demand and you grew.
Yeah, it was definitely a just chuck something out and see what happens. And I love that way of working now. It feels so much more freeing that I'm not stuck to a schedule. Like you mentioned before, when we were having a chat before you started the interview, I get to decide. And I know that's very different for different people in different businesses. For you girls, maybe it's different, but it's just me. Like I get to be human and be switch off when I want and make use of my on-demand content, my online content where I don't have to show up in person. And that has been really weird, actually, as well as massively freeing. It's been like I still get this now. Even, and I went on a trip recently and I had the same thing happen. I feel like I should be being productive 24/7 still, even though I'm earning a full-time wage and my business is running in the background, like without me doing anything really massively to keep that going if I take a trip. That is really odd to me. That's very foreign still, but highly recommend.
Yeah. Who's next, Jen? Kathleen?
Yeah, sure. I can go. Thanks for sharing, Dani. I love that. Yeah, so I guess I'll summarize my experience and my story as well. So I had chronic fatigue and POTS and chronic anxiety as well since I was a child. I used to get panic attacks and I used to faint from the panic attacks when I was little. And I used to be a professional ballet dancer, and then I had a chronic injury, so I had to stop, and I became a yoga teacher, Pilates instructor, movement coach, massage, everything that has to do with the body. But that wasn't enough for my very high achieving perfectionism self. And I was just like, I didn't feel like I was enough. And I was very also, there was this not enoughness coupled with passion. So it was like, I'm really passionate about this, but I'm not going to settle. I'm going to do more. And so I was like, I want to be a physio. I want to be a doctor. So then, but because my education was only in ballet and I had the highest and everything, but no like sciences, math or anything. So I did biomedical sciences and I loved it. And then with that, I went to physiotherapy and I loved it. I was so nerdy and like just loved it so much. But that whole experience like really increased my anxiety and I started to have really bad pain in between my shoulder blades, my hips, my calves, like fibromyalgia kind of pain, really aching, like unrelentless. And I just thought, I don't know, I'm not moving as much and it's very stressful. Probably that's what it is. And I was managing it with my yoga, with breathing, but I wouldn't do yoga or breathing for one day and it was so bad. So it was, and with what I was learning, I was like, this doesn't really add up. Like, how, what? I don't understand. This is not my experience. This doesn't feel true. So then this is very interesting. I don't think I've ever shared this, but my last placement before I crashed with CFS was in a fibromyalgia clinic. And the last day, and I was, what are the chances? Anyway, I was in this clinic and the last patient of the day came in and I was with my clinical educator at the end of the session, just reviewing all the patients of the day. And I remember her saying specifically, you really don't want to do this. You really don't want to work with fibromyalgia patients because the pain, we don't really know if it's true, if they're making it up. And it's this experience. And I was there having similar pain experiences, not quite as bad, but I was so much more aware. And I went home like so angry and confused. And anyway, so I crashed soon after. And then my journey into the business basically became, I don't want to be a physio anymore. I want to do this, whatever this is, because I didn't know what that was yet. But once I learned everything and I started healing and learning that all these things that I had learned about specific areas of the musculoskeletal system and just in general, our nervous system and our mind, body, everything, it didn't really resonate and I didn't feel like it was true anymore for me. And I was seeing patients and the questions I was asking, because that's what you have to do when you work in a healthcare system, you have to ask the same questions. It just didn't make sense anymore. I'm like, I don't want to be asking these questions. They make no sense for this particular patient anyway. So yeah, so I left physiotherapy and while I was still healing, I was finding my feet. I met Carden, who is my now business partner. And I didn't really know how it was going to begin and how it wasn't like we're going to start a school or whatever, a CFS school, and it's going to happen. We were just like, I want to help people. Maybe I'll start with one-to-ones. I'll get a few certifications. And then Carden was like, let's hold a container. Let's hold 5 people and see what happens. And I was like, cool. And I like wrote 8 weeks of content in a day. And Carden was like, whoa, calm down. And I was like, I got more if you want, do it. And then that's how it began. So in some ways, like Dani, like I resonate with that when you said not on purpose. The purpose was there in terms of I wanted to help the people, just didn't know it was going to become this business. Yeah, and it definitely helped me just alchemize what was happening inside me already, like my healing. And I chose the first day I did the brain retraining 8 months before. I chose to say, I saw some results and I chose to say, I'm healed. I'm choosing this path of being healed. And I wasn't like, I was still having symptoms, but I was like, no, like this experience getting there is really helping me. Like, I like this. So even with the business, even if I still had ups and downs at the beginning, I was like, I'm healed. It's fine. I can fucking do this. And then I did. So that for me really worked, just staying in that state in my mind and body, like, yes, this is right, this is good for me, this is, everything is healing, it's light, it's good for me, it's good for me. Yeah, okay, that's it.
Awesome.
Going,
Thank you.
stop it.
All right, Kathleen, it's your turn.
I love these stories. It's so beautiful to witness both of you just following the call that's happening, and it's awesome. My story, I started as a physical therapist a little over 20 years ago, and I was actually trained in the Sarno method and Thomas Hanna, and I worked with mind-body disorders with chronic pain. And I fortunately was trained a little bit alternatively to the typical physical therapist in the States. I had some awesome mentors. And so the irony is that I worked with chronic pain, a lot of fibromyalgia, a lot of the chronic stuff back in Portland, Oregon. And so I believed in the mind-body connection. I really understood it. And then somehow I started to get ill. And before I knew it, I was chronically ill and unable to work, and diagnosed with things like Lyme disease and chronic viral infections and chronic fatigue and PTSD and just mold and the whole thing. And I was like, what the hell? It was like it came out of nowhere. But really, it was just building up my whole life, high trauma as a child. And I didn't apply my mind-body medicine because I had infection. I had real toxins and the lab test to prove it all. I didn't have pain, and I never had pain because I knew how to work with pain. It never happened to me in all those years, which is pretty rare for my type of situation. 10 stubborn years later of chronic illness, trying to heal it in every way I could, I lost most of my function, and I was just in a dark, quiet room, couldn't drive. And so I thought, I wonder if those old functional neurology exercises I used to use. So I used to use a lot of functional neurology, mind-body medicine, Hanna somatics, things like that. I wonder if those functional neurology exercises that I did with chronic pain would help. And so I went and actually saw a functional neurologist to take, I wasn't going to be my own patient. And sure enough, I started to turn around like quickly. I'm like, what the heck? I've got Lyme disease. How is this possible? And all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, it's in the brain and it's in my nervous system. And this infection, my only infection is fear. You hear me say that. I was like, that's my infection. I relabeled everything. And I started using those tools that I was taught years ago, and coupled with recognizing some of the new tools of neuroplasticity that had emerged, which was the brain retraining. So I really started to hit that, understand that, and had really good results. And so I immediately saw a need in the brain retraining world that they weren't doing these other practices that I thought were important because of my background. And so in 2018, I launched a beta program. Like, I knew, how did I start coaching? I just did. I just started coaching. Like, people would find me, and I wasn't fully recovered at the time, but I knew I had breadcrumbs for them that I was looking for. So I was like, I need to help these people. And it was like, I'm a few steps ahead of them. And that's all that matters in the process. Just kept going through that. And then I realized that there was a huge blind spot in the brain retraining community of bottom-up practices, somatics, polyvagal theory, functional neurology. And so in 2018, I started to create a little beta program that launched in 2019, Creating Calm, and just to see how it would work. And it was interesting because it was like a half and half. Half the people were like, oh my gosh, I love these exercises. And half were like, you are dangerous. You're having us look at our body. These eye exercises made my symptoms worse. When I go into this is bad. And we are taught to stop and go away. And so I had a rocky entry into the brain retraining world, and I became like the coach over here. There was the normal coaches, and then there was Cathleen, and she just does things a little different. So I rolled with that for a while. And so a business was starting, but I never thought of it as a business. I just felt a need and a calling that I wanted to follow. And the next calling came when I launched the Primal Trust Mentorship in 2020. Again, recognizing this brain retraining world was just like rewiring themselves into circles. Like I would get people that done the typical programs for years, and I'm like, what do you visualize? I don't know, vacation here and this there. I'm like, what are you rewiring yourself towards? And they're like, I have no idea. I'm like, you missed the boat here. Who are you and what do you love? And I realized this values-led rewiring was also missing. And so my next project was, I'm just going to start a mentorship. I didn't have any content written. I was sitting on a rock in Sedona, and it just dropped in. I'm like, okay, it's 9 classes and we're going to launch it in 2 weeks, because that's what I do. I fire first, aim later, one of my downfalls. And I had 50 people show up, and it went really well. It went really well. We worked on this inner work. I had done the somatics and stuff before, but this was more of like parts work and developing this inner adult that I was realizing I needed to A, start functioning in a business world, and B, just functioning as a mom, and C, like finding this essence that I had lost as a child, or maybe I never had, this true self. And I recognized that a lot of people in this chronic healing journey didn't have a sense of self. They didn't know what they loved. They had a lot of conflicting relationships with their inner parts. And so I just started doing a lot of stuff. And people will tell you early on that Primal Trust, she's just doing all this stuff, but it's how I do things. I'm learning as I go. I'm trying things out. I'm really wanting to understand this whole collective of chronic illness. And it just started to snowball. And next thing I know, I needed mentors and I needed helpers. And I rewrote my mentorship every single time. I was testing out the beta program of Creating Calm and what worked, what didn't. Just following a call. I still don't really consider myself a business person. I'm just, as Chaz, I'm a manifesting generator. My strategy is to respond. I'm just responding to the needs in front of me and building the content off from that. And then in somewhat of a chaotic way, creating a whole team and a business. And who works for me knows that about me, that you're getting into a big experiment. And that's just my way. And it's starting to really come together. Here we are a year out of the Primal Trust mentorship, Primal Trust Academy and community. And it's grown. We have a big staff, and my job now seems to be training the mentors and training my staff and helping to empower them. And Jen was saying, like, helping people believe that they have worth and value along the way to be helping others. They're a few steps ahead of others. And there's a value there in mentoring people and teaching people what them the practices that are helping you, holding space of co-regulation because you get it. And I see that as one of the biggest issues, is that people wait for their recovery to start bringing their value into the world. And that's just not how, I don't think that's the best way to have it done, because then you don't recognize the value that you had while you were ill. And when you're recovered, if you think it was only when you're recovered, you're going to be afraid of getting ill again, because that was the you that had no value and no worth. And if people recognize that they are living their purpose now, the recovery white knuckle grip loosens a bit. I don't know if I've totally went off track here, but the point is that the business now is really helping those along the way to find a purpose and a passion and be able to give back.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think what's really special about what you're doing too is you aren't afraid to put it out there. Like you said, you called it like a beta program, but you've changed Primal Trust literally every time you launch it, relaunch it. And I think that's really amazing because you're not afraid to change something and have it look like it wasn't good enough before. You're willing to stand in your authenticity and your truth and just be like, hey, I'm just learning too. I'm trying this on. And you're willing to also bring it out to the people better. And I think that sometimes people are afraid to put something out better than what they had before because of the fear that people will judge them as it wasn't good enough before. And it's not like that. You're just saying, hey, I don't need it to be perfect. I'm learning too. I'm growing too. And I think that gives people permission to also approach life that way.
This field that we're all in, like we're all trailblazers, and think about what we know now is so much more than just 2 years ago, right? So we're all in this whole arena is so new. It has to change. It has to adapt. It has to evolve, or else we are missing the boat again. We're missing what's coming out in the collective consciousness that's needed to be healed. I receive different information now than I did a year ago, what to emphasize and what's coming forward. And I think that everyone in this room is on that conscious expansion journey and bringing live transmission as you go. It's not like things were the old way where you make a program and that's just what it is for 10 years. I just think that time is done in the collective.
Yeah, I see a lot of people always saying, oh, she's always like improving things, which is really cool that they're taking it that way, which is, yeah.
There's a few that, what? It was
Yeah.
a beta program? Yeah. Where did this? It didn't exist anywhere. Of course it is.
Okay, so it sounds like none of you really had this big vision and that you were always working for. You just had this feeling, you had something that you're passionate about, an interest, a thought, and you moved into it, and then it's just built and grown along the way.
I always had vision of something really big. I didn't know what it would look like, and I didn't know it was going to be a business but one thing I did do when I was healing and when I knew that once I found out that healing was possible, when one person only had healed and recovered, and I watched their video, I was like, that's it. If they did it, so can I. And when I started to use the tools that helped me recover and heal and learn more about myself, and what I did every evening was, it's pretty basic, but everything on that list I now have. And I was talking about this with someone a couple of days ago, and I was like, wow, like all those things are now an active experience of my life. And on that list was, and I remember that when I wrote these 10 things out, it wasn't like, I don't know, a big house, live by the beach. It was like, how do I want to feel? Like, why do I want to live by the beach? Why? How? Because of how it makes me feel. Why do I want passive income? Because I'm a projector, and that's how projectors work. I want something that helps. Why do I want to help people heal? Like, how do I feel and how do they feel when they receive my wisdom through my own experience that I learned through other people? And like, just going through all those things, my vision was an expansion of all of this to help people recover. I didn't know how, have a life that now we are completely living. And also, yeah, so I think that I did do a lot of manifestation, and I think I always have. I just didn't call it that, but I have always had a lot of belief. Like, if I want something, it's totally possible. I can get it. I can live it. I can be it. As long as I just keep rehearsing the feeling of having it, then I know that it's accessible. If I don't rehearse the feeling of having it, then it's scary, like more scary than ever. Yeah, so going to what Kat was saying about your, like, the experience and value, and what do you feel like, who are you and what do you want? Like, you're healing for what experience? What are you going to be? How do you want to do this? For who? For what? And so we too, because of my experience, and we have that in our program as well, because it's great. There's the practices and all that stuff, but then what is it all for? It's not just you wake up and you do the practice and then, because if there's no bigger picture, there's no any picture. The brain is like, these neurons are only going to fire if there's enough drive behind them and belief and feeling, and yes, I can see who I am, who I want to express myself as and be, and what I want and what I just think we have so much incredible potential with our mind and body. It's just truly magnificent. It's truly amazing.
Yeah, I love that. I want to ask you a question specifically. So, in your past life, it's quite common knowledge now that you were a bit of a perfectionist. We've talked about it, you've addressed it earlier. You were that way in your ballet and just in your living and with your business, it sounds like before. But now it's very well known in CFS school that you teach in a way that's everything but perfectionistic, and you really encourage everybody in your program to do opposite of perfection. There's no one prescription, there's no one right way. You're not very like, this is exactly how you do this program. It's make it your own. There's no right way. How did you get from A to B?
I like to think of myself as an adaptive perfectionist. So there's maladaptive and adaptive, and there is like a path whereby you, which I didn't know this before. I was a totally maladaptive, but I think the reason why the four of us are in this room, because of some adaptive perfectionism and some pattern of high achieving, but like in a more conscious and aligned way, rather than I have to do this because of my dad, or because of this, or because of that trauma. And that's what I was doing. I just didn't know it, but now I do. So from A to B, it was essentially taking because it is useful, like adaptive ways of mastering something is useful. It's how you get from A to B and succeed, right? If you want to pass a test, you can't just be like, I'll make a few mistakes, I'll be fine. You have to pass the test with enough margin of error that you actually pass the test. At the risk of sounding that perfectionism is not a bad thing, I do want to actually give a little bit of credit to that pattern. It's not all bad. Yeah. So A to B is A, it's like you make a mistake and I'm a failure. I am nothing. I feel worthless. I get pain in my body. I experience a very bad experience. And then through learning to tend to the needs of little Jen, who never really got that secure ground under her feet, that safe, unconditional love that was calm and it's just there and everything's okay. It was just like chaos. Going back to her every time, like, why are we doing this? And also, what are you feeling? How can I keep repairing that relationship to myself, with me towards her? And through that build and repair, she feels now, if I'm 100% honest with myself, she feels like her needs are being tended to. So I am now able to use some of my perfectionism, adaptation, let's call it, I don't know, but in a way that feels safe and not scary. And that was through the repair of this relationship to my inner child and feeling safe and secure in my body. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And yeah, but absolutely, if anyone about our program, yes, totally. There is no one way. We are all different people with individual experiences. And we are just, all of us, we're just guides for you to take the experience, the knowledge, the wisdom, the practice, and then make it yours, because that's how you're going to know that it works best. Because at the end of the day, it's you with you and no one else.
Yeah.
And so if you make it yours, then you know that it's there for forever.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's funny because so many people that find themselves in this community and in the program types of programs to help them heal. It's funny how often there's people that are like, oh no, I want to be told exactly what to do and how to do it because of their past conditioning. That's what feels safe for them in that moment. And it's
And
coming.
then we say,
yeah, what do you say?
I was going to say, and then we say pause, and then we say that's a neurology that you're doing.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily helpful for this particular
Yeah.
healing path. But yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, you're good. Dani, I want to ask you a question now. So you talked about how even today that there's still this struggle with the feeling a need to be productive, even though you have a fully functioning business in the background and and there's a party that knows you can take this trip and everything's okay, but you still have that feeling sometime. So I guess I'm wondering like how you manage that feeling, how you work with those feelings when they come up to best care for yourself on this journey. And I'm going to double that up with part 2, which is how did you learn to feel confident in taking space and honoring your boundaries as your business started to grow and not worry about how that would reflect towards your members or your clients, if you will?
I think it's similar to what Jen just touched on, where I'm honoring myself and my inner child and my inner experience like I've never done before. So it's a very different approach to this role than any other role that I've ever had. So I still have, I think this is just normal for any human, levels of conditioning and memories of how I used to be business wise or work wise. And like you say, you can turn your maladaptive traits into positive traits by treating them with love and not fear. And I think one of the main lessons that I learned through healing, and I'm still healing now. I think healing is just going to be a long-term thing. I'm still healing old traumas and stuff now that are very much related to that type of conditioning, that kind of, what's the word, like lack of, like I have a long history of like maybe not having enough money or maybe not doing as well and having to push harder and work harder and stuff like that, and from my family and stuff. So it's just patterns that I've learned to accept and be compassionate towards, learn from, and just sit with. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to feel weird the first 2 weeks of your trip because you think you should be doing something more productive or something, you should have done another course before you left or whatever it is. There's always so much more that you can do, but I need to honor my capacity, which is still sometimes up and down. And I need to honor that child inside that, like Jen said, never really had that kind of constructive boundaries and ethic, if you like, in terms of how you're working. And I think now being super real with my like audience as well, my sort of community, is so much more resonant than just being a brand as well. They really appreciate my honesty, and I need to have a break and I'm going to take a break. I think that it gives people permission to think, oh shit, I can actually do that as well in my everyday life. And I'm not running my own business. I should be able to choose. And yeah, it's a privilege to be able to choose those things, obviously. But given the circumstance that I'm in, I can. Every minute of every day, I can choose to change my mind. Yeah, I need to show up in a certain way for certain things, but it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter way of showing up like I used to believe it was. Like, you have to show up this amount of working hours, you have to work 9 to 5, you have to work Monday to Friday, you have to. Now I can just make up whatever that is as long as I show up and I create the content and I'm showing up for the community. I think it's a very new way of living, definitely. And my partner, he's a software developer and he works a very old school way of working. So put the two of us together and I'm not getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning and going training and then getting to work to his desk at 6:15. I haven't woken up yet. It's weird to have that in the same household. And that kind of triggers me sometimes to be like, if he's doing it, I should be doing it. But actually our businesses work very differently. So I think it's just going to be a continual learning curve, finding out what fits and works for me and my inner child and what feels comfortable, and then just working that way. But yeah, setting boundaries has always been difficult for me. I never even knew what boundaries were. But setting boundaries with myself has been really important, as well as with other people in the community and stuff. Learning where my limits are, seeing my capacity burning before it actually happens, and then having to stop. Yeah, it's been a serious learning curve of learning about myself and honoring that no matter what. First priority.
Yeah, it sounds like the journey of like your business kind of developing and unfolding has also been congruent with your continued growth and your continued healing, because it's reflecting these old patterns and these opportunities for you to choose and step into something different.
Yeah, exactly. Every single time I do that, I'm like rewiring, I'm setting that new neural pathway and deleting the old one. Like, it does just take a lot of repetition. I'm much better with it now than I was before. I think it just takes time and practice, like any of this healing stuff does. Like, I'm happy with that now, and it takes as long as it takes. Like, I'm comfortable with that. I don't beat myself up about anything anymore. It just is what it is. Like, just accept it and embrace it. Whatever happens.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right, Kathleen. So we know that your business, it grew fast. It came out of nowhere, right? Like you had 50 people in one mentorship. You launched this community not knowing what to expect, and it took off. And sometimes when businesses start to grow really fast, it's hard to keep up with them. And I know in my experience, from what I've learned and things like that, it's, oh, where do I go? What do I do? How do I navigate this? And I'm curious how you were able to approach this experience of dealing with, oh my gosh, my business is growing really fast. Like you said, now I have to hire mentors. I'm going to do this. How were you able to navigate that, and also what were you learning along the way in terms of how you could manage your self-care and also prioritize your well-being?
Yeah, such a good question. Again, my strategy is to respond rather than to plan. And in that, I think knowing my design, my gene key, my design, my entire business was built around my gene key and human design. And really knowing that was a guidepost where I could respond to the needs. And I also am somebody who's not a micromanager. Like, I do not like to control others. So I think that allowed me to expand quickly, because I could say, I need somebody to do this, and I just let them do it. I need somebody to do this and let them do it. And that gave me a freedom to continue to respond rather than to manage and control. I'm now at the point where the business needs a manager, so I have somebody else doing that, because that's knowing what my role is and knowing what it isn't has been what has saved my nervous system, my body, my sanity. I'm really clear on that. I'm really clear on my values. I'm really clear on what I don't value. And of course, sometimes in business, you have to do things you don't value. Like, I don't value figuring out the numbers in my books, but I had to do it. And those are things that can throw me out of balance. At this stage, I had to do that. And so I'm also aware that when I'm getting thrown out of balance, like building out my platform and I did all of that myself. I needed to learn those things. Some of those things would spin me out, but I knew why. I'm like, I don't like this. I can do some brain rewiring and practice my valuing this. And I would like, all right, this leads to that. So there are things that would spin me out that I had to do, but I knew they were temporary and I knew I would hire them at some point. And there were things that I did love to do. So that I think that's what helped the expansion to happen. Again, that's part of my design, is quick expansion and community building. So I'm just living it. And getting out of the way is one of the things that I've had to do to let other people build what they're doing in the business, and just trusting that it works out. And so far it just has. I've been really blessed that everybody doing everything, they are empowered to do it their way, and it somehow fits into the whole.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. This is a general question, so anyone can answer if you feel it's applicable to you. I am curious what mistakes that perhaps you made along the way. And I'll say mistakes in quotation marks because we know that there's really no mistakes if we're learning and growing from them. They're just opportunities. But let's say, for lack of better words, what mistakes did come up along the way, and whether that was like not realizing, oh my gosh, I haven't been taking care of myself. I'm not leaning into self-care. I have been putting myself on the back burner for too long, or just any kind of mistakes at all. And then how do you navigate those? What did you learn from them, and how did you shift into something different?
I'll speak to that one. One of my mistakes being a responder, someone who responds, is that there can be some confusion in, do I respond to the needs of my community or do I respond to the needs of myself? And part of growing my business has been another layer of my own healing of my community was how I survived my childhood. So I learned to respond to them for my safety. And in the last year, I've had to recognize that sometimes I'm responding to the community rather than to myself. Regulate. I should have waited another 6 months before I put that out. People were like, oh, I want it now. I want it now. I'm like, okay, responding to you guys. And somehow, even though it was one of my values and I'm passionate, so here's what's tricky. I valued it. I was passionate about it. It was in my vision. And the pull from others was so strong that if I would have just taken a little bit of time to check in, this isn't the right time for me to respond to this. So I'm learning these nuances and subtleties of my pattern and the tricky pulling out, living my passions versus you do that later and attend to me now. And that's been a beautiful development, and our business is always here to help us heal, and it's just leading to a deeper layer. But the mistake was I went against myself and I could feel it, and the momentum was in place in the quickness that I launched that new program. So that's one I'll point out for me.
Yeah. So then you had to learn from that, step back, and then really take the time to really reinvest into yourself and your own well-being.
Yeah. And that's what this new phase is different, where I'm having others help to hold the container of the mentorship coming up. Like, I'm not going to do it all by myself anymore. I don't have to. I'm responding in a new way, and just different forms of pacing, recognizing that it can feel awesome and it doesn't mean it's right now. So that's one of my big life lessons, and I'm in the middle of learning it.
I can relate. When I have a passion or an idea, I want to do it all right now.
Yeah.
And then it's no wonder that when I try to do it all right now, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 5 months down the road, I'm like, wow, why am I so tired? Because you thought you had to do it all now. There's this urgency, this hurry. Does anyone else have anything that they've had encountered along the way?
I think similarly to what Kat's just said, I think diving into stuff too soon or diving into too much, thinking I can cope with doing X amount of classes every week or X amount of courses or X amount of design work or X amount of hours on social media, like just overwhelming myself with everything is a lesson learned, definitely. And I have trouble with delegation. One, because at the moment I don't have anybody to delegate to. But there's definitely something that's, you've maybe realized there, speaking, Kat, about I know I know what my lane is. I know where I feel most driven and where I feel my role is. And that does shift. That has shifted over the last couple of years. I even somehow don't really relate to my pain persona anymore either. I'm not that person anymore. So things have got to pivot again, and it's a tricky thing to keep up with. But overcommitting is definitely I wouldn't say it was a mistake. It's definitely been something that I've learned from, and taking these kind of chunks of breaks that I do allows me to step back completely and like almost start afresh, like, and remember and remind myself, like, I don't need to be on my phone 24 hours a day. Yeah, I do my own social media and I do my own design work, I do my own customer service and shit, but that can wait. Like, I haven't shown up on social media while I've been away really at all, and no one's probably noticed. Like,
I did.
what you think is, did you? Yeah,
I'm
where have you
joking.
been? Oh my
Yeah.
God, we've been waiting.
I was feeling really sad about it. No, just kidding.
It's like we worry so much about what we're putting out there, but really it's being received in a much different way than what we perceive or expect. Yeah, I think that's probably the main thing for me as well. Overcommitting too soon, maybe, or just in general. Yeah.
Okay. Jen, if you don't have anything, that's okay. But if you do,
No, I'm sure I made plenty of mistakes, but something that comes to mind is at the beginning of our business, the way that Carden and I complement each other very well, I think. And we have different strengths, and it's really nice to be in partnership with someone. And I've always been like a lone warrior. I've always had my freelance thing going, or just like work so hard all the time. Whereas through also similarly human design, and I've learned that I can produce much more by doing so much less, and that suits me so much more. So I think one of the things that as our business also grew quite fast, I thought that I could move at the same pace, or I thought that I could keep flowing with my creativity and flow with the community. But now there were other people that I hadn't communicated with, or that I hadn't waited for, or that I hadn't. And then there was maybe some misunderstanding. You shouldn't have said that quite yet. And for me, I'm like this, I don't know, like this bird flying, and I'm like flying here and flying there. And then when there's other elements to the journey, that all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, okay, I'll fly this way. And then it's kind of like my energy is just, I guess, learning how to express myself in a more structured way, which suits my need to express in my flow a little bit less. But I think we're finding a good balance. But so I think it would be that, like, just not realizing how many people are involved, and me just continuing to flow as I normally do. But now there's all these people that I have to communicate with within our team and our community. But yeah, as you said, Chaz, like, every mistake or failure, it's just opportunity. For me, even, I don't know if you can relate, but every crash, every dip, every terrible, for me personally, I have always, in hindsight, been so grateful. I'm like, that's where I learned the most. That's where I grew the most. That's what it was. It was horrible, and it sucked. And it was in that moment, I didn't realize it. But afterwards, it was just what brought me to, catapulted me forward every single time, every setback. And that's been the same in our business. All the things that happen, you just learn, and then, then you move forward. Yeah.
yeah, that's so true. That's why I don't even really like to call, even in the like the pain illness aspect, I don't like to call it setbacks. I'm like, can we choose a different name? Because I honestly feel like every time that we have these setbacks, it's really such a huge growth point and a huge healing point. So can we not have
It's like a
a
breakthrough,
negative?
isn't it?
Yeah. And language is so important. So if we could just maybe change the language around it, like when we have symptoms, I'm healing. Not, oh, I got worse again. Oh, actually, this means I'm healing something deeper. And so language is huge. Jen, you got pregnant a couple months after you launched your business. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and how that impacted the journey? And yeah, just how you were able to balance that and navigate through that?
I've always seen myself as a mother. Like, I knew that I wanted to have children, but when I had chronic fatigue, I was also looking at all these results, and I too had mold and all these things, and the fertility results were very poor. And they were like, I don't know if this is going to happen for you or when, or we. So then when I started to do a lot of work on my uterus, especially towards December, I was doing light meditation on my uterus every night, and just like being with my womb and connecting and speaking with her and creating like a fertile environment and like a place where even I would want to go and rest, and humid and like perfect and ripe. And then in January, I felt the need to try and see if anything would happen. Almost, I don't know, let's see what it would feel like to try and have a baby just this once. I just want to feel the energy and see what would. And then that once it happened. And so I didn't really have time to think like how, but when it happened, I think at the beginning, I was like shocked, not in a bad way, just in a, oh wow, okay, what's happening now in my body? I need to do some reading. What these feelings are weird. And so then that, coupled with this business that was growing, it was a lot to manage. I'm not gonna lie, the first trimester was hard because in the first trimester, my window of tolerance went down a lot. And I had to do a lot of work on reminding myself, like, this is okay. This is your first trimester experience. Fatigue is normal. Being tired is normal. And so it was like a lot of layers, and then also holding space for people. And the interesting thing, which maybe you also resonate, ladies, but whenever I'm going through something, unless obviously when I was really ill, not, but I can hold space really well. It's almost like holding space helps me. It like heals me, holding space. So while it was really hard to have all these layers, I was still seeing my clients and still growing CFS school and having our program run and being with the community. And so almost that was feeding my energy, and then it would deplete again, and then I would be fed again, and so it was just like hard a little bit in the first trimester, but with some of the tools that were really useful, and a lot of the knowledge that I have, like I said earlier, it was so important for me every morning when I woke up, feeling a little bit of the feelings that I had, not the same, but experience of fatigue in the first trimester. I was like, okay, let's just remind my body, remind me. And then it was fine. It was like the best, honestly, from that, something like clicked, and I started to really enjoy my pregnancy and have so much energy. I had so much brain energy, creative energy. And I remember Carden was like, whoa, like again, like what happened? Like you're all of a sudden you have, and I was like, I don't know. I just feel like the first trimester has turned a page, and now I'm like, I have so much energy. My brain is like juicing, and I have all this. And so that was really good. So my experience, and probably Carden's as my partner, was like wavy, as is life. And then towards the middle of pregnancy, we were like, how do I go on maternity leave now? Like, how does this keep happening? But I want boundaries. I want space for me and my baby, and for my body, for my energy. Like, how do we do this? And yeah, I just feel so blessed to have a system in place that we created with Carden, that was in place, that our team and me and the community, like I took literally 4 months off completely, and that was fine, and that was completely okay. And I feel so supported. As I said, like I do feel really grateful for my business partner, and personally, as a woman who just started her business right after these years of illness, and I just felt like a badass, to be honest. I was like, look at me. I remember, I don't know, I was like 9 months pregnant with my husband at the beach, and I was like, I'm badass, right? Like, I'm 9 months pregnant. I'm just chilling. And the mission is still continuing. If I want, I can flow with my community on Instagram, but if I want, I don't have to. If I need my space, I don't have to, but I don't have to do anything right now if I don't want to, because I'm honoring my body. And the community is growing, and CFS school is growing, and we have the self-study, and it's working. Again, like Kat said, we were like, are people going to heal without our, what's it going to be like? Even at the very beginning, we were like, we know this works, but let's see. It's an experiment. It really is at the beginning. And then you see it works and you're like, oh my God, holy shit, it works. This is incredible. And yeah, I just remember feeling like really proud of myself and of my body. Kat, I know you've had babies, and have you, Chaz? And I know, Dani, you haven't, right? Yeah, unless you have. I thought you have. Okay, yes. But I just remember the feeling of just being like, wow, like this is amazing. My body's amazing, and I don't have to do anything. My body's just creating a human, and my brain is not even communicating. It is, but it's not consciously doing anything. So yeah, that was my experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I wanted to ask so many more questions, but out of respect for time, I want to ask one more for each of you. It's the same question for each of you. And that's just going to be, you've all lived your own experience. You've shared a little bit today for people to tap into, but based on where you're at today and looking back on the whole journey of your business growing organically, and whether it was organically or not, if you knew somebody was listening right now and they were thinking about some kind of idea they had, or some kind of calling they felt, or some kind of business they wanted to create, what would be your single biggest piece of advice that you would give anybody out there based on your personal experience, the ups, the downs, the lessons that you've learned, the trials and tribulations, all of it? What would you want to impart into somebody listening?
I think, I don't know if this is going to be as relevant, but for me, finding or stumbling on a niche within this great big mind body world really worked for me and created a space that didn't really exist at that point in the space. The kind of is medicine type thing, the breathing, and creating a business based on the practice side of things and how to pragmatically help yourself, not necessarily the educational side of things. I think if you can find something that really resonates with you and what your passion is in the space, really helps. There's 1,000 coaches, there's probably 1,000,000 by now that are doing a similar type thing, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We need millions of coaches. But I think based on your own recovery and your own experience and your own passions and your own strengths, you can find where you fit into a space, rather than going, oh, I need to cast this huge net out into the wilderness and hope that people stick to it. It's creating something really specific and targeted, and then you find your people. You find there's enough people to go around for everyone to have their own community within this space. I think it's good to have a focus and a niche. They're helpful anyway.
Yeah, love it. Ladies?
I'll speak. I think I'll speak to what I see that people do that I think can be counterproductive. I see a lot of people that have these great ideas and they spend so much time like, oh, before I do that, I need to build a website, find my brand, figure out my fonts. Oh, I better go do this coaching program here and take this course here. And they literally never launch. I have a few friends right now that I'm watching them procrastinate and they have no idea that's all they're doing. I didn't have any of that crap. I just had a great mentor though, who just helped me to be like, just go, respond, do what you want to do, build it as you go, because all of this stuff, it's like it's that, oh, I got to clean my house before I do the thing I need to do. That's what they're doing. They're cleaning house. And if people could recognize that sometimes taking the program and the course and the coach to build the business, I know there's a lot of great people out there, but I never did any of that. I just did what I wanted to do. And I was okay doing iterations. I was okay having live learning rather than somebody else coaching me what to do or how to do. I just did and pivoted. And I think that's embracing some imperfectionism, embracing the mystery, and just being in the middle of it. Yeah.
That's good
Yeah.
advice. I love that.
Yeah.
I will say I can speak to what you said because it's true. I had this idea just for the podcast, not quite a business. I had this idea. I know the specific day and place I was and the friend I shared it with, and it was like this big burning idea, right? But I did that for like 11 months. I didn't start. Because I was that person. I was like, I need a cover art and I need a logo and I need all these things to be perfect first before I put myself out there. And then I realized this one particular day, it was like 8 months into it, and I thought, no, I'm not doing this perfectionism to this degree anymore. Like, why can't I can just start. I can just start and I'll figure it out as I go. This will be a perfect opportunity for me to rewire those old patterns. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to put it out there. If I have to change my cover art 5 times, It's 2.5 years. I don't have a logo yet. Some business mentors might tell you need one. I don't care because it's 2.5 years later and I've put out a lot of great content and that's what matters. So
I
yeah.
totally resonate with that. I think, yeah, totally. I remember speaking to you about this a couple of years ago. I think it was like, you don't need that. You don't need that at all. And also what's really helped me to stop procrastinating and get stuck in that perfectionism wheel, which I do so much with, especially with the design and look and feel and naming and wording and all that, is like, people need your help now. Stop fucking around with the font and the color and is it matching and which one is on the grid and what does it look like and who is it better, is it as good as theirs? There's thousands of people here going, please help me, just fucking do the content, show up, just show up.
Yeah.
Right?
At the end of the day, all that stuff doesn't matter anyways in the grand
No.
scheme of things. So.
I think
No.
for me, a couple of things that I think I found helpful was not comparing myself to others and just living my truth. And I'm generally don't compare I don't have that, honestly, if I look, I don't, but if there's ever the, oh, what are they doing? Or like, how can I, oh my God, is what I'm doing okay? Does it need to be? I think just doing you and showing up as your most authentic self, I think that will naturally bring in what is meant for you, who is meant for you, and everything. And then also, I know that Kat mentioned it a lot, but human design helped me a lot to lean into what I was naturally feeling, but I didn't realize I had permission to live out or be, and the strategies in which you can lean into to really explore what feels good are really helpful. And then one last little thing is, I think especially in this field, no matter what, whether you have 5 PhDs or no or nothing, I think our experience will always be our greatest qualification, if I'm honest. Sometimes I speak to people who do have a couple of PhDs, and your experience and your path is what will work for you. And I think just knowing that's okay, and you don't need to feel like you need to fill in those, there are no gaps. There's just you and your path, and then the path that you're on that's constantly moving. So yeah, that would be my little
Love that.
insights.
So good ones for sure. Thank you. Ladies, this is so much fun. I'm so glad to have this conversation. I think it'll provide a lot of value for people out there who are going to tune in and who have had those ideas burning in their bellies and passion and desire. So thank you for being you and for doing what you're doing and building these beautiful businesses that are supporting people in the healing And thank you for being willing to be here with me
Thank
and
you.
share.
Thank you, Chaz. Mwah.
Yeah. I
Thank
love
you so
being in
much
the
for
same
having.
space with all of you.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, I could
Yes,
get used to this video
So,
thing. It's so nice seeing
yeah.
everyone.
I love this group.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
You're
it's
like
awesome.
a Friday with Chaz, Kat, Dani, and Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a